Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about a film adaptation of a very popular Stephen King short story. It was a part of a book that he wrote called Night Shift, I think it was called, because I do remember reading it, and I do remember reading the book Night Shift. But anyway, we're not going to talk about the short story today. Today we're going to be talking about the film adaptation of Children of the Corn. And this has obviously spawned, a lot of sequels over the years. I want to say a remake was done of this a couple years ago, I think. So there's been tons of film adaptations of the Children of the Corn story, and obviously they've been altered and gone different directions, obviously, than the original short story had. But this is kind of the most true to form version of the short story that got translated into a film. So I'm going to be reviewing that very first Children of the Corn film for you today. And this came out in 1984, I think. So in this movie, Children of the Corn, you guys, both in the short story and in this film, a young couple that's played by Linda Hamilton and Peter Horton. They are basically on this small road trip. Peter Horton's about to start up this new doctor job where he is he has all these patients lined up for the following week when he returns from this road trip. Linda Hamilton's the girlfriend of this doctor, and so they're on the road and they're driving through Nebraska, and they kind of get lost at first. They kind of lose their way. They kind of forget where their destination is after this hotel that they visited for the night. And so basically, they're on the road in Nebraska. They're in a place called Gatlin. And Peter Horton runs into this boy that's in the middle of the road. He's covered in blood. He has this briefcase. They had no idea where this boy came from. He has this weird corn cross in the briefcase and so forth. So they really don't know where this kid is, where he came from, if he just belongs to one of the farms in the area. So they go to this town called Gatlin. And even on their way there, they go to this gas station that doesn't have any gas in it. And the guy kind of warns them not to go to Gatlin, that it's kind of this bad religious cult area that, not a lot of people go to. There's hardly any adults. And so this young couple kind of ignores this guy at the gas station. They go there anyway. And while they're there, they find out that, the town is deserted. There's rats everywhere. There's corn everywhere. There's, things that you could find in a cornfield, like scythes and knives and all that kind of stuff all over the place. And really, it's just the people that they do find are mostly children. And so as they're going through this town, these people known as the Children of the Corn really don't like this couple being there. So throughout the course of this film, this couple is figuring out why this town is so deserted, why it's just loaded with children all over the place, that there's no adults, and who exactly is the Children of the Corn. What do they want? What do they do? Why do they hate adults so much? So throughout the course of this movie, you find out who the Children of the Corn are, and you figure out what's in store for this young couple who's trying to figure out who the Children of the Corn are as well throughout the course of the movie. So overall, guys, I liked this movie. I didn't love this movie, but I liked it. Kind of like the short story. That was another Stephen King story where I liked it, but I didn't exactly love it. So obviously, I went into this film kind of saying, maybe it'll be good. It's made in the 80s. It has Linda Hamilton. The concept's good for the most part. It's not Stephen King's strongest concept he's ever made, but, hopefully it's good. And, well, it ended up being good. So, I got what I wanted out of it, I guess. So for my positives and negatives of this film, you guys, I liked the scary what-if scenario of this movie, of what if there was no adults in this town, what if all these kids who are just basically straight-up murderers are running this town. They have this weird cult in this cornfield in this small town in Nebraska that nobody visits. So I liked the what-if scenario of this movie. I liked how kind of creepy it was, how if you're in Gatlin as an adult, it's kind of this really creepy place to walk around and you really don't feel comfortable. Every place you really can't go to. There's no restaurants, there's no gas stations with gases in it, there's no hotels anywhere. It's just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's just kind of a creepy little place. And I think the sense of atmosphere in this movie was very well established. And I also was very invested in Linda Hamilton and Peter Horton's characters. I felt like I really wanted this couple to get out of this town and to succeed. And if they do really want to find out who the Children of the Corn are they going to live finding this out? Are they going to die finding this out? Are they going to help the Children of the Corn? Are they going to help them, find adoptive parents and so forth? So I liked their mission. I liked following these characters around, finding what they were going to do, when they even something as simple as turning on the radio and having an opinion of what's on that radio that they're listening to. You know, small things like that. I think what is what made these characters so interesting is the fact that, you know, if I was on this road trip with this young beautiful woman and vice versa, what if I was a young beautiful woman but being on this road trip with this doctor and so forth, you know, I think they definitely put things in perspectives as far as, you know, kind of where you would be with the situation if you were this man or this woman on this road trip. And like I was talking about earlier, I really liked that atmosphere that the abandoned town had. However, they reserved a town or found a space or convinced people to basically use this town for a day or so to really make it look like it was deserted and nobody was living in it. They definitely accomplished this. I really liked how the atmosphere of this film really did feel like a town that you would never want to walk into alone. There's also a lot of visuals in this film regarding child drawings. There's a child that they encounter in this town that likes to draw what the children of the corn do and what they might do to people who visit the town and so forth. And I like these visuals. It's introduced in the opening credits. There's a big scene with Linda Hamilton where she's slowly starting to figure out with her, you know, this man that she's on this road trip with, what exactly these children of the corn might do to them if they catch them in this town. So I liked how that really added a sense of visuals to this movie. And I liked how it really did feel like a child would draw this if they really saw this thing happening. And I think I liked that aspect of it. I felt like it didn't feel like an adult drawing these things that children would draw. It really felt like how a child would depict something really scary that they think is going to happen to somebody. So I liked that idea in this movie. I also liked how Stephen King kind of took on a story that didn't take place in Maine. You know, sometimes with stories like Pet Sematary and now this one, and some other ones that he did outside of the state of Maine, I liked how I kind of like his perspective on how he views other states within the U.S. that isn't Maine. Like, you know, he thinks Nebraska has really creepy cornfields, and you know, he thinks that whatever the main subject is or whatever story that doesn't take place in Maine. You know, so I like kind of how he adds kind of his own perspective of cornfields because it is creepy. It is a creepy idea of, you know, walking into this cornfield and something pops out of you and wants to get you and so forth. So I like how he was thinking outside the box and took on a state that he normally doesn't make his stories take place in. It doesn't take place in Derry, Maine, like a lot of his stories do. I also like the character of Isaac in this movie. I think his name, the actor's name, Henry Franklin, I think his name is, who plays the little boy he was actually an adult when he filmed this one. I thought was kind of cool. So he was an adult playing a child character, and it actually works in this movie because I think the character of Isaac was very creepy. You definitely did not want to mess with him, and even when he wasn't getting his way, I liked how I felt threatened by this character, that he really was capable of doing something really awful to you if you disagreed with his ways and so forth. So the character of Isaac, played by Henry Franklin, very well acted in this movie. For my negatives of Children of the Corn, I didn't like how the cornfields and the mortgages to these houses and so forth, and you know, just all the small things feel like they don't add up. So I feel like if these adults really were killed off in this town, and if these kids were really running it and so forth, you know, how can they still have fresh corn? Are the kids running it now? Do they have a lot of knowledge of how to run a farmland based on when the adults were around? So I didn't like how you could still go to this place and, you know, take off a fresh piece of corn off these cornfields. So I didn't like how everything still felt like that business was going as usual. I wanted a sense of, you know, maybe these cornfields were disgusting and that these cornfields didn't have any fresh corn growing off of them in a long time. And, you know, when you walk into the houses, there's cockroaches everywhere and there's rats and mouses. So I didn't like how when these characters would walk into a house, the closest thing to disgusting they would find is like a dirty TV guy lying around. You know, I felt like scenes where they're walking around in town and they see rats in the cafe, or, you know, finding corn and these, you know, things you would find in a cornfield lying all over this town and so forth. So I like that idea of these kids just kind of completely trashed this place after the adults left it, after they were killed off and so forth. So I wanted the small details, like how come fresh corn is still growing? How come the mortgages are, how come the people running these mortgage places aren't after these kids? You're like, hey, how come they haven't paid off these house payments after a while and so forth? So there's small details like that where I feel like the scheme that these kids are running would have dried up quick. I think their scheme would have not worked after a while. I also thought there was some inconsistent child actions. There's scenes where these kids seem to have no problem trying to kill off this couple, while there's other scenes where they're clearly outnumbering this couple, and yet when one of them gets a knife, they get scared and run away. So it's just like their scenes are just like, how come they were scared of that, but they weren't scared of this earlier on in the movie? Or how come they're scared of being like, hey, don't take my car, and they run away, and yet they're okay with going up to that same car later on in the movie and completely trashing it and so forth. So there's small things like that. It's like, how come they're okay with this but they're too scared to do this kind of thing? It's like, if they're really running this town, make them feel like they're running this town. So there's small details like that where it's like things aren't adding up here very well. There is also some outdated CGI, and I know that that's a complaint that you really can't do with an older film made in 1984 like this. But there is a lot of things where when they do use CGI, there is a scene involving Isaac that really is using CGI a lot, and it really doesn't age very well. You can definitely tell that this film, special effects wise, really hasn't aged very well. So that is one aspect of the film where if I were to change something about it, I think that's definitely something this film would have benefited from, was better CGI. I also feel like some of the evil got halted in this film. There's at one point in this movie where, when we're very close to the end credits, the evil just gets completely halted. And I really don't understand why. It's been 3 years since this big thing where these kids took over this town and so forth. How come all of a sudden this couple comes in, they do this really easy thing during this huge storm, and now the evil's halted? How come it's just halted on some, and these kids aren't doing the same thing that they've always have of scaring adults away from this town and so forth. So overall, I'm going to give Children of the Corn an 8.5 out of 10. If you like Stephen King stories like I do, if you've read the Children of the Corn story as a book and you're curious to see how it ended up as a movie, it's not a bad watch. I found this for about $5 at a Walmart somewhere. Not a bad deal at all. Like I said, it's a good movie. It's not a fantastic movie, but it's a good movie. So if you like Stephen King, it's worth your time and money. 8.5 out of 10. A good film, but not a great film.